All right. Good evening, everybody. This is the Personnel Committee meeting, the first Personnel Committee. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, again, I'd like to thank the administration and committee members for coming out on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And with that, I think we can get started. So again, this is the first committee meeting, and right now I think it's really just if we can plot out a vision for this year. This is an ad hoc committee, and so often it seems like our ad hoc committees morph into standing committees, it seems. And I'd really like if we can keep this committee kind of time-bound in our goals. So we'll come up with a timeline hopefully tonight, and I think if we can complete our work in a year, I think that might be ambitious, but if we can orient our actions around that timetable, and I think we can achieve it. So that's just kind of my opening thought here. I'll share some of my ideas for what this committee could do in a little bit. Oh yes, I'm sorry. If we could just go around the table and state everybody who's here.
Rich Martino,
Dane Oxonio,
Connor Kurtz,
Jim Harris,
Carol Bites,
Rob Hurley,
and no members of the public. All right. So broadly put, this committee's objective is to examine the personnel operation within the school district. And some school districts have standing personnel committees where they handle all types of issues from discipline to hiring. For us, I think it's more of just gaining an appreciation for how the personnel system works in our school district and what we need to do, where we can make changes, where it works, where it doesn't work, and what the board's role needs to be in this. So that's my thought. Do any other members want to speak to Mr. Harris? Do you have any? You mentioned that you've been waiting for a while for this committee to come to existence. Do you have any ideas as to what your vision for it is?
Well, I'd like for the board and the committee to take an overall look at what we have, what we need, and also what we can do, because a lot of changes have to be done when there is a chance to do a change. So we can't, there's contract and agreements in place, so we can't move things around sometimes as I or we all would like. Sometimes it just takes some planning.
All right. Well, moving into the committee objectives, I'm going to share a list here. I sent an email to Mike Wolf a few months back laying out some things that I think this committee should address. First, I think we need to examine all positions that are on the books, including job descriptions. Something that I've heard in the past is that we have positions, but they're unfilled. So they can be filled really at any time with the administration hiring somebody and the board approving. I'd like to know what positions are currently on the books and filled, what positions are on the books but unfilled, and what those job descriptions are and what those responsibilities and duties are. So from there, I'd like to ensure that all staff duties align with the job descriptions, so we don't have folks who are taking on extra responsibilities and maybe pushing aside other responsibilities, just to make sure that those things align, which I think is important. Then I think this committee should recommend changes to those positions and job descriptions if need be. For example, if we have a position that's been left vacant for 10 years but still on our books as being an official position, then perhaps we should abolish it. That's the first objective. Second objective would be to examine the procedures for recruiting job seekers and teachers and staff and how we fill vacancies. That could involve and incorporate the substitute teacher issue. I'd like to understand that process and how our school district does it and the folks who are responsible for that. 3, discover what we can identify as gaps and overlaps in the operation of the district. For example, our contracts, who manages those, what role that should be, public relations, who handles these things. Are these gaps in our current structure? And if they are the gaps worth filling, or don't we really need to address these things? That point is more broadly looking at the overall territory, I guess, of the district and the and really, are we achieving the things we want to achieve? What are our priorities for how this district should be structured? And does the actual operation of the district mash up with that vision? I think we need to review the employee handbook and contracts, make sure they align. Compare staff pay with peer districts and see where we fall there. This is an idea from Mr. Martino. Try to investigate a salary range for different positions. What should be a max salary to expect if you're in a role here in the district, and that's what I have there. So I don't know if anybody else has any of their own priorities, what they think we should be doing in addition to those, or whether some of those items aren't necessarily, in their view, the purview of this committee. Really, I think that's what this meeting should be, to determine what are we doing.
That's good.
I think it's reasonable.
Okay.
I didn't write them down, but you mentioned at the beginning that how some of these committees grow into full-time committees. Some of the stuff you listed almost seems like an overreach to me. It seems like some of it's administrative responsibilities. I don't know why the board's getting into it. The employee handbook, that's ours. I think that's the administration's responsibility. You know, I'll go along with whatever the committee wants to go along with. I just think there's some things there that we don't really need to involve ourselves.
I don't think we should really be involving ourselves in any of these things, but the way that I see it is that it's been so long since the board has really looked at some of these things that there needs to be a level of oversight there, just because it's, again, been a long time. And if the administration can, if we can just see the employee handbook and we don't think there's anything.
We just bubble through them, and as we go through them, if we want to dismiss them.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the things I agree with you wholeheartedly, like these positions that I keep hearing, oh, well, yeah, we have that position. Well, no, we don't. We have a line item on a piece of paper, but we don't have a position. Those need to be looked at, and if we could do without them all those years, abolished.
Mhm.
I think what Mr. Harris wants to look at is how the administration should be structured. I'm sure he has his own vision.
Right. And I think that's something
It's a
else.
matter of convincing the board and finding the money.
Right. And
Also,
yeah.
one of the things, let me back up. For the jobs that were created decades, eons ago, generally once a job is created, the board approves the job description, unless it's abolished, it always kind of hangs out there. It doesn't mean we're looking to fill. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, Rob, but there are like hundreds of job descriptions out there. I have one. There are hundreds out there. And I'll make something up. Say this campus, this building and AEC at one point were one campus. You may have a senior custodian over both buildings. So there would be a job description created, senior custodian of Amity campus. But then this building closes or it separates and you no longer have that.
Right.
Unless the board at the time abolishes that or just no longer fills it, it really doesn't matter. But
And that's just what we're saying.
So that's
It
not
needs to be
happening.
abolished. I'll give you a perfect example of why. Several years ago, before I was on the board, I don't even know if Connor was on the board at the time, they wanted to hide a high school principal. So they created a position.
They want to hide a principal?
Hide him, yes. They wanted to move him out of his position without firing him.
Okay.
So they created a position for him. And he basically got paid for hanging around at the end of the year. When he left, they filled the position again. I, as a member of the public, raised my hand and said, wait a minute. That position didn't exist before. And the answer I got was, oh, yes, it did. It's on our books. That's how the system can be abused, by not dealing with these things that have been there forever.
And how I see it, ideally, everything that we discuss in this committee, seeing as this is an ad hoc committee, there should be processes implemented based on our discussions and our decisions that this all becomes automatic once this committee goes away. So there doesn't need to be, I think what we're going to be doing with these positions largely is just cleaning up. if we've had positions on the books for 10 years that are unfilled,
Just get rid of them.
they shouldn't be on the books anymore. So we're just going to have to do the work that the board should have been doing going along. So what I'm saying is the process moving forward will be that once a position is left vacant for 2 years, then it's automatically excised, for example. I don't know. But I'd like to see some processes emerge from these discussions. Okay, so there's that. Mr. Martino mentioned that, or Rich mentioned that you have your vision for how you'd like to govern the district, and you've mentioned this at least. I remember to me looking at maybe more of a corporate governance necessarily than how we do it now with like a CEO almost and a COO. And I don't know if you still want to move in that direction, but things like that. Like I think we can think big in this committee and look at that organizational chart, and if need be, draw it from scratch.
Yeah, I talked to Lauren Smalls, businessman, and he's for that also. Because when you, in schools, especially in Pennsylvania, you have these titles that don't really relate to the real world. If you make Lauren the CFO, I mean, the duties are under a CFO. That's kind of common knowledge on what he or she is responsible for. Me as a superintendent / CEO, there's responsibilities that I'm responsible for, and so on. Spoke to Scott Metz, Chief Technology Officer. There are roles and duties under that he is naturally responsible for, and that goes across districts, it goes across cities, it goes across states. It's kind of, this is what that person does. This is the basic requirements of that job, and that's it. So it's just pretty much getting the language universal.
Yeah, and I think that'll go with looking at these job descriptions and looking if there's any opportunities. Like, let's say that we have a person right now who's just kind of taken on additional responsibilities and is really doing 2 jobs. Well, maybe we need to look at that job description and split it so it makes more sense. Maybe we have people who aren't really living up to what the job descriptions say for their position. I think we need to look at those things and make sure that, and this is really something the administration needs to do because we don't know what every person does in the schools.
Well, what about desk audits? Were they ever conducted? One of Mr. Martinez's innovations was desk audits to find out exactly what everybody is doing.
Well, when we started looking at that, one of the things we found with technology, see, a lot of these jobs existed, I won't say before computers, but there were a lot of, back in the days when schools were the biggest employer of the town. And everybody had a job at a school or a hospital or somewhere.
This town still is.
Okay, everybody had a job, okay? There are certain positions, and I'll use the one that we looked at this year with a certain employee for student enrollment. At one point, student enrollment was done at the school level. It was brought in-house centralized to one person because everybody was doing it a little bit different. Not for skill, but maybe not for training. They brought it into one house. Then with technology and enrolling online and everything, that job only got busy, as Rich noted, like August. It's busy for a few months, and then it's like it's just it's like Christmas time. You're only busy a few times of the year, and then after that, it's kind of onesies, twosies throughout the week with enrollment. Well, that job, we were able to add other duties to it because the other position was only busy another part of the year. So we were able to consolidate 2 jobs.
Now, when we did that, did we revise the job descriptions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And the
But
person
in
had.
that same vein, I mean, I have no problem calling Lauren Small the Chief Financial Officer or Scott Matz the Chief Technology Officer, is that what you said? But would you rewrite the job description or just change the title?
It's a change in the title and then slowly looking at the duties under that.
Is there somewhere where a job description for a Chief Financial Officer exists already?
I mean, not here.
No, but I mean,
Industry.
could it be had?
Yes.
So we wouldn't be like reinventing the wheel?
No, we're not reinventing the wheel in anything that I want to do. It's kind of bring everything current.
Yeah.
But with the desk audits and things like that, when we look at the duties, especially in the finance area, that the secretary and some of the secretaries do the special ed side, there's things that are seasonal active. You know, they're busy the first half of the year, mid part of the year, end of the year. It's not busy throughout the year. So, and also depends on the management and administration, how that person is managed also.
All right, well, going back to the objectives of the committee, I'm going to run with what I have here in terms of working so we can set up a timeline. Is there anything else at this point that folks would like to add in, like any big projects that we may have missed that they think are important personnel-wise, areas that I might be missing in my appreciation for the role of this committee? Anything that anybody will want to talk about, I'd be disappointed if a year goes by and this committee hasn't discussed it.
The one thing that is reoccurring is the diversity in the district,
Among staff.
among staff.
Is what, I'm sorry.
Diversity among staff.
Now, are we talking, when you say diversity, what type of diversity are we
A
talking
little
about?
bit of everything.
Okay.
We seem to pull from the same pool of candidates.
What pool is that? Like just in
Not
terms of
very
local?
good.
or-
Local.
Okay.
We need to broaden our search parameter, and Rob did a great job this year, I guess it's this year, with PA Read. You know, that's where folks who do what we do look for candidates locally here.
Right. And before it was you had to go to the website and look, is Daniel Boone hiring? Well, let's see if Daniel Boone is hiring.
Right.
Or you had to come to the building because we were posting job descriptions
Right,
here.
when I got here, there was a whole,
Right.
on the board, I was like, check that out.
And that's not where the best teachers were going to look. They were going to PA
PA
Reed.
Reed, at
Okay.
least PA
Yeah.
Reed, if you know the area. We need, and Rob and I and Preston, we went to, I think, every university in the area within an hour's drive talking. I reached out to the president of Rosemont the other day, where I went, I know her, and anyone who has teachers. A lot of groups don't have teachers anymore, so they're actually getting more and more competitive. So we may have to look at an alternative licensure or how to recruit people in that we need. We're growing our own, working with people. That's why the sub issue is such a
And this is
tough.
very important because we've seen that once a teacher joins a school district, they're pretty much with that school district their entire career. Is that fair? It's
It depends
rare
on the
to-
rate of pay and what they want
Yeah.
to do. Like I wouldn't mind poaching a few candidates from the charter schools in the area,
Yeah.
outside the area, because they have training. They're not paid as well, but they have experience, and they're happy with our rate of pay. And a lot of times they're non-union, so they have an individual mindset where they're not going to follow.
Yeah, I mean, that'll go all under recruitment.
I mean, for the first time, I think Rob and I, we had flyers made up last year. We went to the IU for their recruitment fair, and we had a tablecloth, and we stood there. I have pictures of them. And we stood there and and he said I tried to kidnap a nurse. I did not kidnap a nurse, but I had her. And bringing people in, because it's hard for us to get people, especially where we are, versus from Philadelphia
Yeah.
to Reading. We're kind of in that no man's land right there, so we need to get people locally. And we found a lot of people were local. And Rob had a great idea of maybe instead of the paraprofessionals or the aides, we hire licensed teachers at a lower pay. They could be our subs, and we would hire from that pool the developing staff to be our full-time teachers when we have openings. We found a lot
I'm
of
surprised you can't poach teachers from Pottstown. Because when their contract issue was in the newspaper, they.
I can get them.
Ours.
I can get them from Pottstown. I went to a Pottstown board meeting, and they realized who I was, and I started getting lots of emails from teachers wanting to come over there.
Huh.
But the thing was, they were moving out of Pottstown. That's it. I think Pottstown did something where they gave funds to help them relocate.
Right.
So they wanted to get the heck out of Pottstown. But they would stay. We just don't hire enough.
Yeah.
We may hire.
We're talking about recruiting right now, but what positions are we recruiting for?
Not really.
Like, you know,
But we will for social studies. A couple here and there.
okay. All right, so I'm going to add staff diversity to the list here. Then moving
Going
on.
back to your vision of the staff, though, would it be possible to provide the board with how you would like to see your staff, you know, what you would like to see as a staff? I mean, you talked about a chief financial officer.
I have it done.
Yeah.
I can send it to you.
It'd be nice if we had that as a starting
Yeah.
point.
I'll send it to you. I have it done.
Great.
It's like the first day I was here. We talked about it, yeah.
All right.
Do we have to give Rob money to move?
Yeah, down the hall.
All right then.
Can I do
Oh,
a- can I just-
yeah, no, please. Plenty of
At one point in
time.
time, we used to have, I don't know if you were alluding to this or not, aides or teachers, substitute teachers that would be on site all the time. They report every day, regular full-time workers, and then if we needed them, we put them in the classroom. And if we didn't, I guess they found busy work for them. Have you considered going back to that model in any way? And it got cut because of the cuts, and it wasn't
Well, that's,
wise.
like building aids, building sign. Well, that's back in the days when schools had a lot of money, or they thought they had a lot of money.
Right.
What we do now is we have Precision HR, which is our company,
Mhm.
and they'll send people to the buildings, a couple, and usually that's the minimum amount needed to fill the daily absences.
Okay.
And a lot of times, those subs get used to a building, the principal gets used to them, the staff gets used to them. What happened this year, a couple times, I believe it was at Monocacy, but don't quote me, where there was an opening over at the middle school, and the Monocacy person was filled. They said, hey, go over to Monocacy, I'll go over to the middle school, and they said, oh, I want to stay here. Well, it doesn't work that way.
Mhm.
So we don't overstaff and give them busy work. Everyone has a purpose. So that's one of the reasons why I put into play on November 1st, letting the principal know you're not going to be in, so we can get staffing set, not at 6 a.m., but at 6 p.m. the day
Right.
before.
Okay.
So we
It's
don't
not
have people.
necessary to go back to that
I
model.
mean, it
anyway.
would be nice to have more subs, but at times we don't even have enough subs to fill the openings that we have. It also depends on the grade level. High school is much different than elementary.
Well, that's another thing that this committee could look at. You mentioned how we changed, and this was a board discussion, the procedures for calling out sick or taking a personal day or whatever. If there are any procedures like that, internal processes that you think now's the time to change, and if the board needs to play a role, if we don't need to have a role and you just have the prerogative, the administrative prerogative to do it, then by all means you can do that. But if there's anything you think that needs to come to the board, then this is, I think, a good committee to
Yeah,
air
or
out.
codify some of these ideas that
Yeah.
these innovations that he's coming up. We need to get them in regs or guidelines or something somewhere.
A
We
lot
need
of
to do
it,
that.
a
It's
lot of
real
it comes down to
visible.
enforcement on the principal level. So what I do each week, when I do my weekly report, is I check the attendance, and, my little bar graphs are easy to tell, and you can notice certain trends where it's effective certain places, and other people may not be applying it the way they should be.
All right. Well, then, on that note, I think since we have some ideas of things we should discuss, looking at a timetable so we can do this, hopefully within a year, priorities. What, Mr. Harris, do you see as what we need to focus on immediately in the short term? Committee members, if there's anything, like what do we think are the
Short-term meeting?
or long-term projects that we need to get started sooner rather than later?
Short-term, I think having a good pool of candidates always helps. I mean, you did PA Reed. That's gotten,
Gone up way.
Yeah.
We were getting 3 people for like our reading specialist job, which was one of our last hires before PA Reed.
Wow.
We were getting like 3 people applying for a job, and that's not an acceptable level pool for a whole variety of reasons. As to Connor's point earlier, is one of the most important things we do is the hiring of a teacher, because if we get that wrong, it's very challenging to remove someone from the field, and we'll leave it at that. So it's a very important piece. So I think getting the right people for the right jobs is very important in our field, especially.
So I think then we should talk about the hiring process and recruitment. I think that would be a good topic to start with. But something I'd like to do, I'd like to get to work on is, and this speaks to item 3 on the agenda. I'd like to start receiving some of these job descriptions so we can start looking through them. And I don't know if there's a master list somewhere. Okay, that would be a great place to start, just to see.
Is it on the website, just like back end somewhere?
not on the
It's not
website. I can have Lisa Keefe send it to you. It's pretty.
Connor, with regard to job descriptions, do you want to start with job descriptions for positions that we have, or job descriptions for positions that we don't,
Well,
that aren't currently filled?
How do you have it structured, like this data that we're
They're
requesting?
just all listed.
They're all listed. Do they indicate like which positions are filled? They don't even indicate that.
Oh.
Well, I guess we're just gonna have to get the list then and see. I wouldn't mind going through and looking,
If you look at it, you can pretty much tell. There's
Oh, okay.
not a lot of, I mean, you know all of us.
Right.
There's not that many
Right.
people.
If you
so-
can't put a name with a job
Yeah.
description, then we probably don't have it.
Unless you say a Spanish teacher 3 or something, but administrative wise, you know all of us.
okay.
It's,
It shouldn't be that challenging then, okay. Well, I guess that's where we start then, just with that, what we can get information-wise.
But you understand my point, like, if there's the two issues, right?
Right.
One is trying to get positions that we don't think should be on the books anymore
Yeah.
on the books, right? Which requires looking at the job descriptions that aren't currently filled, right? And then there's.
I think that's a good place to start, right there, looking at what, if we can send a list on to the board, hey, these are positions that are unfilled, we need a motion just to abolish them, or whatever the procedures are. So I think that would be a good place to start, but
Yeah, I mean,
then,
can't we get them filled and unfilled, listed by filled and
yeah,
unfilled?
I can have Lisa, or,
okay, if we can
Yeah,
get
if
that,
you
that's
look
just
at it.
less work on our part then.
That's a great idea.
but we get emails from other districts all the time asking for job descriptions.
Oh,
You know, we're hiring such and such. Does anyone have a job description?
Hmm.
Have you ever hired anyone like this? You know,
well, do we have like a matrix of, this is the responsibility, these are the people who fill that responsibility, whether it's whether it's a teacher, whether, like Spanish teacher 3 has the responsibility to do X. That responsibility is shared at Spanish teacher 3, at Spanish teacher 2, at Spanish teacher 1. Like, does that make sense? So we can look for overlap,
We have
or,
more like that in the business office, where certain types of material information needs to be filed. Certain people have parts of that. But I don't.
well,
And redundancy?
An area-
Person's out? Is
yes,
that how- yeah.
that's important too.
Starting that now. What, I mean, in certain areas, redundancy, well, business office backs up business office. Building level. I mean,
That should be on everybody's job description, who would they back up?
If someone's not there,
Well, I know I can speak to, recently in this district, I've had an issue where I'm trying to get in touch, or I've tried to get in touch with a staff member on the administrative side or on the support side. There were 2 people who filled this role, and if it's the same job description, the responsibility should be the same. But I was told routinely that, oh, well, person A handles that, and person A is out today, despite person A and person B sharing the same job description. Is that what you were speaking to, Mrs. Bites, with the redundancy?
When
and-
Mary Ann Price left and we didn't get enrollment figures for 6 weeks.
And even, yeah, procedures.
We need that, that's what we need to address.
Right, so kind of like what happens when a role is left, like let's say somebody quit today, let's say
Make sure there is-
Rob just left today. How would we pick
Right.
up from there? Because so often it seems like we're scrambling as a board to reassign staff, to come up with something. There should be a procedure, whether that's an acting assistant superintendent, whether that's like, what is the procedure there? There should be something kind of, I think, standardized. Just kind of professionalizing the way that we handle our personnel. And it's not as much ad hoc, but it's that we know when X event happens, well, then here's the procedure to respond, and the procedure is Y. Things like that, I think we just need, the board hasn't ever really involved ourselves in these things. We've just kind of always let them happen, but I think that's come back to bite us a few times, especially recently, now that we have some new leadership at the top who you haven't been part of the Daniel Boone culture, so to speak. You came in with a perspective from outside, and coming up with the culture, people know how it operates, but you had a different way of seeing things, and I think I know as a board member, we've seen some of these situations arise where somebody leaves and we have to scramble to get those responsibilities met. But anyway, I think I made a point there, but.
And if I can speak to that, being here through the culture, we had in the culture the same situations of, I know my job and I know it, nobody else needs to do it. But with the changes we've undergone, we, as a management team at the high school, administratively, we've gone through and have changed that in our building because it's not effective. We've had different people come and go, and we have established and are working on detailing them and not keeping them up to date, a building level procedure.
Good.
So there may be, I mean, I know there is in our building for our office staff in particular, because we didn't have redundancy and somebody left or was out, and that was an issue that we recognized and are working on trying to do that. But my staff, we did it last year, we're doing it again this year. I just sent it to them in December and said, please make sure these are up to date. Some people need to flush things out further. And the feedback I got from my staff is, okay, this was only 6 months ago. Things have changed so much already. So that hard part is not only developing them, but making maintaining them,
Yep.
with the amount of responsibilities that individuals already carry,
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
And that's something to be said for, I think in our school district in the past, we've made personnel and staffing decisions based on people and not on positions. And I think that a professional organization, it's not based on the person, it's based on the position and based on the responsibilities. And I think we need to get back on that track.
In line with what Megan's saying, and Jim, you've been around in enough different places that I know you're aware of this. There's a common failing in management to not share everything they know with the people below them because they don't want the competition. It's like, I know this, I don't want anybody else to know it. And I don't know if that goes on here, but I always found that the more your staff knows, the better you succeed.
Not here so much. There's not that many layers here. You don't have, you had me, Rob, Lauren, who else? Shelley, then the principals, Casey, Scott. That's it. And that's the layers.
Okay.
In line with what Connor just said, and this comes back to the high school, if Megan took ill and was out for months, do we have somebody that could fill her position? Or do we have to go scramble to go outside?
No.
Or is there a way to teach somebody, say a teacher or someone else, to step in temporarily
At the high school, at the school level, we would be
in the
okay.
middle school?
At the school level, we would be okay.
I think the question is there like collaboration or reporting going on a regular basis as far as what people are doing?
Within the
They
building.
bubbling up?
Within the building, but not building.
So within your building too, do you have a handle on pretty much everything Rob is doing?
Yeah, we have pretty much an idea,
Business
but we all do
office, yeah.
unique things, like, we all do
I
something
realize
unique.
that.
We don't
Is
have,
that being communicated so that if Rob were out for an extended period of time tomorrow, could somebody step in,
Rob,
pick up his?
not without talking to Rob. Not
So he
without
doesn't
talking.
routinely report to you about statuses, like you report to us weekly on the.
Well, he does.
Does he report to you?
He lets me know, well, he's working on this week, on this, that, and that
Okay.
next week. But I couldn't go in if he said, I'm not gonna come in for the next 3 days, and step right in where he left off without him sitting down with me for
More of a
about an
turnover.
hour and.
He's not gonna give you
Understood,
Title I
yeah.
funding, like there's
Yeah.
stuff you have to do every month dealing with Title I, he's not gonna be able to step in there
Well,
and do that particular
Like
piece.
those essential things,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
also we need to, like, that should be in the job
Well,
description really
SOPs are
too.
called standard operating procedures. Like, do we have those things within our organization in any way? The standard operating procedures for certain parts of your job, like.
We have
regular-
Yeah.
shape guidelines.
Yeah.
So you could literally step in and do that then,
Yeah,
because there
but-
is a
but-
process.
But for example, I mean, I can see his calendar, but if he said, I'm not coming in Tuesday, Wednesday, do my job and just walk out the door.
It wouldn't be necessary
I
if he's coming
wouldn't.
back, right, is what you're saying?
No.
Well, he's saying that wouldn't even happen, right?
No, what I'm saying, if he went Tuesday and Wednesday and said, see ya, do what I was going to do Tuesday and Wednesday, Jim, see ya, I wouldn't know. Because he doesn't outline his day on everything that he's doing, neither do I.
I'm more
Him,
concerned
Lauren
if he's
doesn't
gonna be out
either.
for 6 months. Could you step in
Right, then we would sit down together, all of us together as a group,
and figure it out?
and figure it out. Well, he would say, this is what I'm working on, these are the deadlines, this is what I have to do, here's my number or whatever, and here you go. That's how it
So
works.
it's tied to the individual, it's not.
Right,
tied to
unless
the
there was
job.
an assistant to the assistant superintendent who, like Kathy knows what I'm working on, Lisa knows what he's working on, Kathleen knows what Lauren's working on. We all know that within our areas. But if I left tomorrow and said, okay, Rob, do what I was gonna do, he would look at my calendar and go, well, what the heck is, this meeting?
Mhm.
But then, well, a lot of times we're in the same meetings, but he handles the principals and the PD, or I handle another area. But if he said, okay, I'm gonna be gone for a week, this is what I need to take care of, I'd say, okay, show me this, okay, got it.
Well, on that note though, I think that something else we could do better, and I'd really like to get Mrs. Weber's perspective here on this, if she wouldn't mind sharing it. Cultivating talent within our schools. Like, are there folks who want to become administrators within the ranks of teachers now? And how can we facilitate their professional development, not just doing what the state requires us to do to make them their official professional development they have to do continuing education and all that, but instead career development. I think that would contribute to a more, positive work climate, and I think you'd have better staff if we were assisting them in achieving their professional goals.
Connor, to your point, we actually do that. And part of it's bureaucratic, but part of it's very real. When you go for a principal certification beyond just getting 60 credits or whatever it is in the college classroom, part of what the state law requires is that you do an internship. I think it's about 180 hours. And so what they can do, and when people do go for these certifications, a lot of times they'll come to us and say, is there anything we can work on? Is there anything, can I sit with you while you're doing this? Like, for example, if Megan's doing the master schedule, we almost always, when we have a principal, if someone is interning, to try to get the principal's name, we either have them sit at the high school or middle school with the master scheduler, because the master scheduler takes some effort at those levels, significant effort at those levels, so they can at least begin to understand that process. Different things, they can't do discipline and stuff like that, but maybe they're sitting in on certain situations, so they can learn. Not a perfect situation, but there is some mentoring, and I agree with you. It is important to continue. There needs to be a career path for anyone who desires to go to the administration.
Your majority of teaching staff want to be teachers,
Right.
but there are some people who want to move up, and I think that ambition, we should recognize it and facilitate.
Absolutely.
But
Good point, Connor.
okay, I want to work on coming up. So we have recruitment as being a particularly salient topic. I'd like to get this job description, sorting, looking at what's on the books, sending some stuff onto the board, get that out of the way. I think if we're going to have any larger wholesale transformation of positions and titles, I think the natural place to start that would be with the beginning of the next school year. Is that when, let's say we wanted to adopt a more corporate hierarchy. Okay. So we need to plan for that. What I'd like to do is put together a year-long timeline, and we can talk about it. I'd send it out to the committee over email, and we can discuss it at the next meeting if we'd like to move anything. But just to have a vision for where we're going, and I really like to stick to a timetable of getting this all done within a year, so again, we just don't keep going and going and going. Again, I'd like to prioritize the two things I just mentioned. But that's topic 2. If there's anything anybody has to comment on that, or any objections, if we'd rather just come up with a timetable collaboratively as a group, but I'd like to give us a starting point at least. Is that a wasp?
You get the one wasp that made it through the winter.
Yeah. Whose job is it to kill the wasp?
Assistant principal.
Discipline, there we go. All right. Before going on to the final topic, I had a thought a few weeks ago, and I wanted to run it by the committee. I think it would be, I'd like to know the views of different subgroups within the staff right now, and the staff as a whole, how they view, are they satisfied with working in Daniel Boone Area School District? Are they satisfied with the rate of pay? Do they think it's high? Do they think it's too high? Do they think it's too low? We break that down by administrator. Are they an administrator? Are they a teacher? Are they a classified employee? How do they feel about their building's leadership? How do they feel about the district leadership? Do they have any ideas for how things could be improved in the district? Like a survey, I was thinking.
I did one.
You did one? Okay.
I got the metadata from MATS, which I couldn't understand, so I haven't put something together. But what I got back from the union was people were afraid to do the survey because it was I said it's anonymous.
Yeah, and they didn't believe
and
you.
they were afraid. So a lot of times when I've done this in the past, I have to do it with like paper and pencil almost, because people know their emails can be tracked or whatever, and they always feel it can be tracked. So there's apprehension. And I sent 2 out, and Amy comes over and gives me a smile. Well, they were just nervous that they didn't think they could do this without being anonymous. I said, it's okay. I just want
For
to
the record, that's a bad sign.
Right.
Right.
If your employees distrust you so much that they're
Yeah.
not willing to
Share their
submit a survey,
opinion.
there's
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah. No, I think there's an interest in doing it and giving feedback, and we just have to build their trust more.
Okay, well, I'd be interested in seeing those results.
Do a paper survey, and then we'll enter the data ourselves.
Well,
That's what they need to feel safe.
It's a lot of coding. I've done that in the past.
yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I think that now, especially the contract has been settled, building up that the good faith in the district is
How many
important.
questions were on your survey about?
20. What we do now, we do weekly,
Tons of third parties that do
we,
it.
we do monthly daily birthday announcements. We do attendance. I do the Golden Apple
Right.
Award
Yeah,
that people are
good
happy.
things
So we're
happening.
slowly.
What about Survey Monkey? Why wouldn't they?
We did survey, it was a
They're
Survey
nervous
Monkey.
about Survey Monkey?
And it's not everyone, it's a small cohort of people.
Well, I mean, and if you don't want to voice, I don't know, I mean, like you can temper, if you're really afraid of something like that, you can temper your comments so they're not going to be inflammatory or whatever. But if we're giving an opportunity for feedback, and I think that's another thing we should talk about is that climate. And I don't think that you can change it overnight. I don't think sending out a survey is going to change it. I don't think giving out 1,000 Golden Apple Awards is going to change it. But there are steps we can take to make our employees, I hope.
I disagree. I think we are taking those steps. I think all those little things do matter.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think the little things add up. But I don't think it's going to happen overnight. And I'm trying to see.
Jim's got us on the right path.
Okay.
I think the high school is doing really well this year. When I first got here at the high school, they were always complaining about Preston and then at the high school. But now, this year, they've been so quiet.
I
I'll say
know,
it
I'm
again,
hearing
they've
the
been so
same thing.
quiet. Really, what the heck, are they open? Because they're not, I mean, I think consistency.
We got some
And-
positive press, especially over
Right.
that incident with the bus and Mr. Harris stepping up and taking responsibility. We
Mm.
were praised by the paper, you know.
And I think just consistency of leadership over at the high school.
Consistency.
People get to know who's over there, and they know it's not going to change, and
Yeah.
because it's tough to keep changing to different leadership and different philosophies and learning. Oh, here comes a new person. He's going
Okay.
to come and go in
And that
2
fear
years.
is being
Right.
kept. We had 4 superintendents in
And
the
that's
first 3
probably
years. Now
the
we've
bigger
had-
story here is that there's been so much change within the district at all levels that it's hard to thrive in that type of environment where it's,
It's just time now, and
Yeah.
consistency and calm and all the leadership that I think that we put in place, especially building the district with, Mr. Harris at the helm.
all right, well, if there are any other ideas, you mentioned the Golden Apple Award, and that was something that came up in the C&I committee. And now that we have this personnel committee, those types of employee engagement strategies and ideas, I think this would be a good place to discuss them.
I mean, we've gone out. I think Jenny, maybe you were with me. Right? People have cried at the Golden Knight giving them certificates. Were you with me when they cried?
Oh, I heard that,
Yeah,
yeah.
a couple times.
Yeah,
And then
just
it's
a
always
little
funny when I
gesture like that.
say Rich Martino nominated you, and people are falling out of their chairs, or Preston McKnight nominated you, and they're just amazed. Now, but to me, if it's Preston nominated, I can see if Rich, because he's not in the building all the time. But Preston, in my opinion, Preston should be going around giving more praise. But they're so shocked
Right.
Uh-huh.
that this
True.
Scrooge
True.
guy, he never smiles or never says
Why
anything.
wouldn't you have Preston give them out with you?
He does.
Oh,
He does. The principals come around with me.
and they're still surprised?
Surprised that he nominates.
Yeah, because I read what they wrote. So a lot of times, or if a student did it, students in the room, I say, tell them, Becky, let's read what you wrote about your teacher, and they blush and they enjoy it. But yeah, I just think they shouldn't be that much surprised that Preston, I'll keep picking on him because I pick on him, appreciates their work so much.
Well, that's the beauty of the program. I mean, if you can elicit an emotional reaction like that from somebody for a program that is costing us nothing, like what are other things we could do like that to make rewarding workplaces for our folks? And these are ideas to think about. I'm not looking for answers
Yeah,
tonight
if you have it,
necessarily, but
just
stuff like that.
Because they say we're never appreciative for what we do. And you'll read something that's nominated by a parent, by a student, by a board member, by a principal. I mean, I have something nominated for a middle school principal. I think she has like 15 nominations for some reason. Whatever she did. And usually after I leave a building, I'll get more nominations. People see me and Scott walking through the building with the principal, with the cameras, and people are happy. We take the group pictures now with the staff.
How does, just because I know we talked about this in CNI, I just want to get some feedback here. If a teacher is nominated, is it pretty much a foregone conclusion that they're going to get the apple, or is there some, okay.
No, we read through it, and I think the guidance counselors at the high school, or one in particular, is loved by many, many students. That's not just a popularity contest.
Right.
A lot of it, the first group are alumni going online and
Nice.
writing about They're teachers from prior years who had an effect on them.
What about other staff members? We're recognizing teachers.
I
but-
do have one for a custodian
Good.
coming up. First one for a custodian and a principal. Never had a principal before.
Okay.
Let me come back to what you were saying for a second, because you say there's some problems, and I can only go by what comes to these meetings, the union, and some of the members of the public. And I told Dane that I have something I've started to write for Monday night's meeting, but that's besides the point. One of the things I mention in there is people seem to confuse respect and money. Because for years, I and other members of this board have been told we don't respect the teachers. And that's absolutely not true. On the other hand, I don't think we can afford what we pay them. I sat in my granddaughter's second grade class the other day by invitation of the teacher to observe a math lesson. I went to the largest parochial school in the country many, many years ago. I had 92 kids in my class. The nun had no aide. She had a pointer, and that was her aide. And you didn't hear a peep. I sat in this class the other day, and I couldn't have given this teacher more credit for the patience she exhibited, trying to manage these 22 kids that were in her class. Who's singing, which girl's fixing her ponytail, who's getting up to sharpen a pencil, who's going to the bathroom. I couldn't get over. And this is today's parenting that allows this, but I have all the respect in the world for what the teachers have to do to get their point across. And she did. She taught the math lesson, and they learned it. But I have all the respect in the world for it. Doesn't mean I don't respect them when I talk about the contract. And I think that's a big confusion amongst the public and the union.
Well, it's funny. When I did something in Amity a few months ago, and I had 4 fourth grade classes brought to me in the cafeteria. And the teachers were staying there. And I said, no, you guys can leave. I got this. And they said, all 4 classes? I said, I got this, trust me. I know it. So I said, all right, get out, goodbye. And they're like, ooh, you're making our teachers leave. I said, okay. I split the group into 3 different groups. And I did what I needed to do for about 20 minutes. And we got it done. And then they were quiet, we did our thing. And then I said, go get your teachers, tell them to come back in. And they were like, you're still alive. I said, it's not that bad. You know, I got this. So I understand. There are a lot of different things going on now in schools. I'm trying to be nice. The teachers are very skilled, but they would like, they want 8 kids in a class and $80,000. So that's not really realistic.
Close.
Yeah, that's, okay, 10 kids and $80,000, not really realistic. So.
Okay, so then, if you can send out that survey, and we can, just a number of people who took it even, and
I get it too.
if there's a way we could break it down, like I'd like to even hear from the administrators, because so often we hear about, like we're talking a lot about teachers, but there are other employees in this district too, and I've heard rumblings from administrators about some are satisfied with their pay, some aren't. Like I'd like to hear feedback from a whole cross-section of folks, but we'll see what you already have, and I guess we can go from there if.
I have an idea that might start it coming from me. Why let the union administer the survey? That way the teachers don't have to worry about their email being tracked.
Didn't they do something like that?
I mean, it would be your
To
survey.
administer it, your
You'd
survey.
write it, but they would compile the data.
Yeah,
They asked
that's
for
kind of a good
feedback
idea.
From the membership, like on the things they cared about as far as contractual.
Yeah,
things like that. Like they've done surveys
that.
in the past.
No, but I mean your
What if
survey.
they're,
Let it
They
be
have-
your
they have
survey,
The mechanism.
but they send it out and they compile the data. That way it's not coming back to you for you to trace.
Well, the data should be the data, like it just goes to an online and the union can look at
No,
it, and we can.
they think that we could go back and track their IP address or
Yeah.
something.
So it's conspiracy theory.
They used,
Okay.
when they did the ones prior to being administrator, they use your personal email address, you do it from your, like, you didn't have to use it from your personal computer, but if you were concerned, like, you could do it with SurveyMonkey. when they
They're
collect
from
the
home, right?
data.
They think we could track.
Yeah,
all
they
their
have
home
they
computer?
have a distribution for their home email addresses and things like that, along that line.
See, I did mine on server, I'll go online, anyone could have gone in. All right, no, I send it out. I
It
forget how
depends on
Scott
if
did.
they have a copy of the link and how.
Yeah.
Yeah, they think that it's really the same IP address that comes from like every one of the different, I mean, if a teacher does it at school, they're really anonymous because my understanding is we have one IP address for the whole school, but I think they're concerned that their individual computer, like say at this computer.
You know what's sad about
I'm a lot on the
But I've seen it happen in
library.
other places
For
too.
Scott on that
Yeah.
piece, but.
I've seen it happen in other places too.
No,
This is
I
not
think
just
your-
here.
I think
your
there's a
MAC
lot of-
address is probably
Perception is
encoded too.
reality.
If you really wanted to, you could figure out who
Yeah.
it came from. Now, there are, I mean, corporate entities have the same problem, right? They want feedback from the people, they want feedback from the employees are reticent to give honest feedback because they're afraid that it might get them in trouble with their boss or their boss's boss, whomever, right? So there's tons of third parties that administer stuff like this, but they are, in my experience, they are all literally they're either tied to your email address or they send you a code that you have to enter, and that's that's how you activate the survey. But then, because it's administered by the third party doesn't share any information with the hiring company. So it is, from our perspective, from the company that's administering the survey's perspective,
We
then
would
you
have
can't
to,
get it.
we would have to call ABC Survey Company in. They would have to do a professional, a presentation in front of the whole staff and say, this is how it's
Sounds
done.
expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
It would be expensive.
It would, yeah. They would have to show them how it works and then send it to them, and then we get the information, the summary of it with them. And you still have people go, no, they're still going to pay, and there's a back door to that somehow.
Absolutely. The people who think that you're tracking it now are never going to be
Right.
convinced because there's always a way.
Right.
Right? I mean, if you're,
Well, this is a very common thread that I hear, even in the community, from members of the public, and maybe it's an excuse for just not wanting to get involved, but there's a fear that there's going to be some type of retribution against them for either coming to the podium and speaking up against something. Maybe it's against the board, maybe it's for the board and against the administration, maybe it's against the union, like whatever. There's fear that there's going to be some on-the-ground retribution, whether it's their student is going to be affected negatively. We're seeing the same thing with our staff, and maybe that's just a function of the type of organization that the school district is, but I think there's something unique in this district that is worse than in others. And
What's sad is that. in the
maybe
past
it's
20
lack of
years,
trust.
Rob, I don't know if you've been here 20 years, but I bet you can't think of anybody that's had any retribution for speaking out.
You know,
You guys ever read Facebook? They'd get torn apart by themselves, by each other on Facebook. I know somebody spoke up against that one, and everybody piled on. She said something about, the board did something well, and she got piled on and she got blacklisted. There is retribution in this district.
No, I meant from the administration, from the board.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but they can perceive it because it does exist.
well, thinking
At
about
one level.
Dane mentioned a point earlier that I agree with. The fact that there is so much consternation, or maybe you mentioned earlier, Jim, that it wasn't necessarily a large group of people who had these issues with taking the survey. But that is feedback in and of itself, that there are people who aren't comfortable sharing their opinions for whatever reason. And I think that is something, we spent a lot of time talking about making
Yeah,
staff
let's just
happy
look at the
now.
ones who did respond.
But I think there has to be a way, and I guess time, that's the only thing that really can improve and fix these things, but
The way I used to do it when I was involved in other things, even in the military, we would have the first sergeant would walk through formation, pick 6 people out, random. Bring them into a room and talk to them for an hour. That's it, you just pick random 6 people and just have a conversation. You get more out of that than the survey. Now, I did it twice. The first time I was honest. The second time I did so many push-ups after being honest that I was never honest again because the drill sergeant got me. So he said, "You did what?" I was like, "He said that it was Private. I said,
I thought you
"No,
meant in
wasn't
Daniel
even-"
Boone, you did
Yeah,
it
so
6
did I,
times.
yeah.
No, so, so you just do a random ID check. Just go down the line and that one, that one, that one, that one, that one.
Well, it's like you
Come
did
and
with the
have a
student
conversation.
groups when you
You
came
can,
here.
though, they might
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
fearful
Yeah.
of telling them
Yeah,
exactly
and then
how
just
they
have a
feel.
conversation. So maybe that's what needs to be done. We pick out a random 6 group of people, and we sit down and just have a nice lunch and have a conversation over pizza. Since he doesn't eat, we have pizza, and
Good things start coming out of that, maybe people would be inclined to.
Well, if you were to have something like a survey from, like, let's say it was sent out by Mike Wolf or something, then it's I don't know if the issue is with the administration and the staff, or if it's the staff and the board. I don't know if the staff and the board
Maybe
matters.
the union finding out what their answers are.
Yeah, maybe, I guess this is something, I mean, if you're going to share it with us, we could talk about the survey
Yeah.
stuff later. We can move
Yeah,
on from
let's move
that
on. You got
topic
one
now.
more issue?
The other thing was just trying to figure out, in order to accomplish some of these goals we've articulated, what information we'd like from the administration so they can work on compiling it and have some time to do it. One thing I think, clear the job descriptions, and you're fine getting that out, sent out. Something I'd like to see, comparing our organization and the size of our administrative team with other school districts. I'd like to see our organizational chart and then organizational charts from other schools or districts maybe that we aspire to be more like, districts that are similar to us in terms of our peer districts. I think that's the term that we hear a lot.
That'd be great.
Just to see where we stand. I imagine we're a pretty lean district when it comes to our operations, a very lean district. But I'd like to see how other districts are set up, and not to say that necessarily we should copy them, but just to see, to talk about these gaps that we're going to talk about that we might have in our operation. Seeing what other districts do can give us a good starting point to identify those gaps, if they exist.
Yeah, I'd love to see organization.
So that might be something the BCIU could help with, or it might just be as simple as going to these websites. It should be that simple.
when I pull the data for our peer districts, I look at our number of students, our free and reduced lunch percentage, and I'm pretty close. There's only really 4 or 5 peer,
Yeah.
and I can get those. I
Okay.
can reach out to
Yeah, I'm interested though in seeing, I mean, when you look at budget and size, I mean, Pottstown is a peer district there. If you look at, I mean, Exeter is similar in a lot of respects.
Pottstown is not one of our peer districts.
Right, they're not an official peer district, but they do have some characteristics similar to, like, I'm interested in seeing the levels of administration too. Like, we're pretty flat. I think we're flat and lean. There are some districts, I mean, I think that, not Exeter, Boyertown is more of a hierarchy type district. And, like, I think it would be informative just to see how we stack up. So if we can get organizational charts, and if there are any districts that anybody would like to see specifically, I guess just we can send that information out, get in touch with Jim. Thinking what else? Is there a written, like, let's say we had a position and we wanted to, is there like a guide, if I were an HR person in Daniel Boone, if you guys hired me as the HR director, do we have documents explaining, well, here's how we hire, here's the process for filling vacancies? First, on date number 1, we put the job description out there. It's up for 2 weeks. So on date number 2, 2 weeks is up, and job description closes, and we get the list of applicants. Interview starts next week. Like, are there procedures that are written
That's
down
what
in
SOPs
place?
are, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to see us migrate to those. That's
I don't-
industry
You don't think so?
business
Not
standard.
with that. I mean, that's Rob, I don't think, we don't
For
hire.
me,
Is it just kind of
Yes.
informal, like
It's
we?
informal, Connor,
Okay.
as a rule of thumb, and we, like you said, we go through, the first thing we do is we look at we do a preliminary screening based on criteria. Usually then in most cases, we're talking about, teaching positions primarily right now.
Right.
It happens a little bit different when you're looking for other types of positions, but teaching positions, then we'll go to the building level, and then we'll do a final interview at the district level. And that's generally how it happens. Depending on the position, there could be some variances to that whole process.
But there is not a standard process.
No, there isn't.
Okay.
So
All right.
it's not-
Okay.
Not written. I should
Yeah.
say, not written.
Right. So, well then, if there's any, like, those are the 2 items that I have on my list of documents that I'd like within the next, if possible, if a month or maybe half a month or 4 weeks, whatever, so we can discuss it at the next meeting. if anybody else has any information that they'd like, I think, please request it now so we can give the administration some time to work on it. But if not, I mean, we can always send that, we can always get that information later too. But really the purpose of today was just to figure out where we want to go and what we need to do to get there, and hopefully we'll come to a timetable where we can try to accomplish all these things expeditiously.
Something I'd like to mention to Jim. Jim, when I was board president, Mary Beth Torsia was still here, I had talked to her, and I don't know how you feel about this or how Mike Wolf feels about it. You'd have to discuss this with him also. But at our meetings, the committee of the whole and the voting meeting, we have 2 rows of administrators sitting back there, for the most part wasting 2 or 3 hours because all they do is sit. Do we really need them there? What I had suggested to Mary Beth Torsia was, I think it would be more important that the relevant administrators for a committee meeting where they would actually have a give and take and input into what the committee's trying to determine would be more important. That way you don't have them all there, only the ones that are relevant to that discussion. Or, I don't know, I mean, I just don't think, I don't see the sense in having them all sit there. And I don't know if they all work a 13-hour day that day, or if they come in late, which means they're not doing their job.
Yeah.
I
They
think
stay
that's
late.
something that you and
I'm
Mike
trying to-
ought to have a discussion about.
I was
I
telling
think the
Rob
same thing.
the other day, my prior lives, the agendas were broken down by area. So, for example, there was information meetings, and then there were action meetings. That's like our information of the whole and our voting meetings. In the information meetings, say there's an area that's under facilities, where we're looking to purchase repairs on the roof. Well, the director of facilities would go up to the podium and say, today I bring before you this information on a roof repair. The roof repair is this, then that person would explain it, and I was operations, I would explain the roof repair.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If
Do
their
you have
attendance is
any
relevant to the
questions?
meeting, then they should be there.
Then they shouldn't be there.
Or even
No,
if
I totally agree.
AEC is going to have 15 students for the Pledge of Allegiance, well, then for the principal to be there, I can see it, but otherwise, for Dave Miller to sit there for 3 hours and nothing's being discussed that impacts Amity,
I agree.
don't know that it makes
I
sense.
think it was necessary at one point in time when we were in so much flux because no one person had all the answers. But now that we've streamlined and management, we seem to have, central people who can provide the answers. I don't know that we need everybody.
Yeah, you pretty much
It's like
have
the
your
Safety and
entire,
Security Committee, that meeting I sent you the email about, and I asked that you decide what administrator should be there.
Well,
I don't know
one,
who should be there.
well, one of the things that happens in our board meetings, though, we sometimes get off the agenda topics and start discussing things. And it's nice to be able to say, okay, hey, Dane, we're discussing your building now. What's going on with your building? Or Preston, what's going on over here?
It'd be nice, but it doesn't
The
rush.
question is it worth it?
For you to say,
Or make them on
I'll get
call so
with
we can
Dane
put
and
them on
I'll
the
get back
phone
to
if we
you.
need them.
They can do that too.
There's
And one
very
of the
little
things,
that has to have an immediate
Rarely.
answer.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you can
And-
have, there's a difference, like you can have your senior staff, you, Rob, and Lauren at these meetings, but then your rank and file administrator, like if there's something pertinent to their building, then they can come. And I like the idea of the presentations. Back at the Airport Authority in California, that's how it worked there
That's
too.
how-
It's a common, it seems that, you know,
Unless it's like in the interest of time, because like that's the way we do it in committee, but maybe for the big meeting,
well, if it's work, if they,
presentations by so many different people.
no,
just
no,
to-
it's not a presentation. It's just a matter of, this is my department. and It's an information item I bring before you. So if you have any questions, I could
And then they
answer-
just summarize it, they just give an
Right.
overview, and
And
they're
then
there
during the
for
next 2
Q
weeks,
and A.
you could contact that person with any questions and
and,
they can
and
answer. it
perhaps
for
the
you.
way you do that is almost like we do with our student government reports. The expectation is that we'd hear from special ed an overview of their department or their update comes like it's, so it's not, are you looking to be more like project based? Like
It
would
was
be.
all just project.
Agenda.
Oh, okay,
It
all
was all
right.
just on the agenda. Your item is on the
Oh,
agenda.
that-
You go up there and say, this is what it is. Do you have any questions for me?
I guess
Maybe
that's something to
the
discuss here.
administrators I'm sticking up for them, I don't think I want to
And
solve.
that's, it was just easier that way instead of, and if it was finance and operational, I would stand next to the CFO. We would stand there, we would have the conversation together. Did you talk to Dennis? I went through the finance, we did the budget, this, that. And because then the assistant superintendent wouldn't have to go into detail about it because the person who's managing the project could answer all the questions for it. So,
Well, I guess
Yeah,
that's
it's a
your
decision you
prerogative,
can
I
make,
guess,
yeah.
but with Mike, but.
Yeah.
All right, well, then, so we're looking to have for the next meeting, I will put together that timeline, an organizational chart, list comparable organizational charts and job descriptions.
Survey and survey.
And the survey, right, the survey. All right, well, if that's it, does anybody else have
I
anything?
just have
for the-
one question
yeah.
for them. We stretch you guys, we're like, we run lean and mean. How does this committee and the responsibilities now that we're putting on you play into your, is this going to be a undue burden on you guys for the next year? Do you feel that you can manage it?
We'll get it done.
Or,
yeah,
do you feel that way?
I mean, I'll get to this by the end of the week.
Well, and hopefully what we resolve in these
It's amazing. Every
committees.
time we dump stuff on these guys, they
Well, I think it'll help the administration as well as the board and the entire district. Like, we have this committee for a reason, it's because things haven't necessarily always
Yeah,
worked
and
in
in
the
the end,
past.
it will make us leaner and meaner and more efficient, but I'm just, the mechanism
Well,
of
hopefully
getting there,
leaner
we're
and-
always
leaner and
giving our
nicer,
administrators
but-
more to do, and it just amazes me how they rise up to the challenge. I just want to acknowledge that at this point, and I want to defer that if there's some other way to handle it. If we need to bring in consultants to do things, I would be open to these things.
Well,
This is
let's
one of
see.
the few
You can manage
districts,
it?
this is one of the few districts, though, that the principals and assistant principals are all part of the leadership team.
Hmm.
A lot of times, there's a chief academic officer, there's a director of elementary ed, secondary ed. They're at
So
the
there's
table
efficiencies there.
where the principals are handling the building level duties, where you have the director of elementary ed, the chief academic officer handling all that. So that person will be at the meeting, but we rely on the principals as part of the leadership team here, which is unique, and I've talked to other districts, and they say,
Well-
well, you know, some people like that, and some people don't like that. 'cause it
On that
requires
note, though,
them to-
we mentioned earlier sending out a survey to get the opinions of pretty much folks across the board, but seeing as Rob and Megan are here tonight, if they have anything they think that we need to look at in terms of this committee's scope, anything that should be on the timeline, if there's anything you guys, okay.
I work with Jim.
Well, recognizing that your boss is right in front of us, but,
We just want to make the district as efficient as it can be.
I understand that.
all right.
Jump in.
Well, on that note then, unless there's anything else, finishing early, so that's nice. Maybe we can get this done in fewer months than anticipated at the outset, but, all right, well, very good then. This meeting is adjourned at 8:13.